Hello and welcome back to Reality Check. This is a channel that cares for hearts and minds. We have conversations every week on mental health, especially in the areas of parenting, family and marriage and relationships, and also the workplace. And my name is Racheal. I am your host and joined by Dr. Evas, who is not new to our old subscribers. And she is the founder of International Center for Mental Health and Family Care. She's also a trained therapist in the areas of marriage, relationships, parenting, and she supports the workplace too. So if you need her services, you need support in those areas, please do reach out in the contacts that are showing on your screen. Today we are going to be talking about a mental illness that is prevalent in the world. It's actually recorded that it's the most prevalent mental illness in the world, and that's depression. But with a special focus on men, depression in men. Men don't often talk about depression. Because they are maybe too embarrassed. At least some have said they're just too embarrassed to talk about it, because there's a lot of stigma that surrounds talking about your feelings. Maybe that's the way they see it, talking about your feelings. And so we want to talk about depression in men and perhaps how we can support them or how we can bring awareness to this mental illness. So welcome, Dr. Evas, and joining us to discuss this very, very sensitive conversation is Ben Mwine, who I'm sure many of you know as my husband.
I was waiting to
You were waiting here, I was going to introduce him. We'd kind of had like a discussion, so how do I introduce you? So yes, he's my husband, but today he's going to be talking. He's joining us for this conversation, which I believe he's passionate about.
Today he's your guest.
Today he's my guest, yes, and Dr. Evas' guest. He is the head of partnerships and protocol at Next Media. And he's going to be lending us a man's perspective to depression in men. Welcome, Ben. Welcome, babe. Okay.
Conflict of interest.
Conflict of interest. Yeah. Not all the time talking serious things. Once in a while we laugh a bit.
Glad to be very happy to be a part of the conversation. Big fan of the channel, big fan of the show.
Thank you.
For both emotional reasons, but also for personal reasons, because I think what you're doing is absolutely incredible, and it's a conversation that needs to happen. And so, thank you for doing this.
Thank you so much, Ben.
Thank you for
we
being
appreciate
here.
that.
So I mentioned earlier that most men, the majority of men, I don't really have the statistics, maybe Dr. Evas might help us with that, are not keen on talking about their mental well-being in general. And so I want to ask, where is this rooted? Why are men embarrassed, for example, to talk about their mental health? Should we do guests first?
I think so. We should do men first.
Men first.
That's a new one, yeah. Men first. It's a number of things. One, our upbringing from when you're growing up as a boy, you're told you're a boy. Actually, I think from as early as maybe 5 or 6, the average male would have been told you're a man, don't cry. So you can imagine a young boy is being told you're a man, don't cry, bottle it up. While the girls, on the other hand, are encouraged to embrace their feelings and express themselves, and yet we all have feelings, right? And so because you keep that in and then you're not talking about it, eventually it becomes part of who you are. And I think the longer that goes on, the more difficult it becomes, so you don't know how to really express yourself. I think maybe for a few of the Gen Zs now, it's a little easier for them to express themselves a bit more, proactively. But for the people who are slightly older, anything from the 80s and below, it always seems to be a much harder thing. You don't know where to even start. But then also beyond that, I think some of it comes from bad experiences. You become vulnerable. Usually it will be to a girl, and then now you have weaponized your feelings. Because the moment there is any sort of issue at some point, then it's thrown in your face. When you open up to the men, either they'll tell you, grow up, take it like a man, or it will be a thing of, okay, because even they don't know how to deal with it, they sort of move on and ignore it and say, okay, fine, so you're depressed. Oh, sorry. did you see the Liverpool game last night? Right?
Quickly move on.
And so you left there thinking, okay, I've bared myself naked and I've been left hanging. So you have that vulnerability and yet no solution, so you think, I'm not doing this again. And I think, from my perspective, I think that's what usually happens to the majority of men. And as you mentioned, you add the component of the fear of embarrassment. What will people think about me? I am the head of partnerships for Next Media. How do I come and start saying that I'm struggling with my mental health? And how? And yet we do.
Doctor?
Thank you, Ben. I was writing.
You were writing.
Trying to understand the brain of a man.
Yeah.
Yet again. So thank you, Ben. I just want to take it a step below, before society. And I think it's also rooted in the divine nature. And I've said this here before, and I'm going to repeat it. I think we were having a conversation on marriage and family leadership and the whole submission thing. Most of the things, divine nature has already given them to us. And sometimes we don't understand them because vulnerability is not always very easy for a leader.
Yeah.
And depression, much of it is rooted in the fact that we don't know how to be vulnerable. I mentioned when we were having a discussion on stress and stress management, and I'm going to go back to that. Not every stressed person gets depressed. So, as a matter of fact, we need a little bit of stress, right? So there is, we need a little bit of stress, but then we manage it and move forward. But then the thing is, when the trigger doesn't get dealt with, what has triggered your stress is not dealt with. The body just responds by producing more stress hormones, more stress hormones. So we move from a stage of healthy stress, we go to a stage we call reaction stage. Now, at healthy stage, you're still okay. You're not comfortable, you have a bad day, but then you can still manage the stress. Yeah. But then, as long as the trigger is not dealt with, you're going to move to stage 2, which is reaction. There, the moods still start getting distorted, and the challenges are more. You're having challenges sleeping and all and all. If you don't deal with it, you're going to graduate. Your stress is going to graduate to a stage we call injury. If, again, you don't deal with that, then we get into a stage we call depression. Now, depression or mental illness or illness stage. So that is the stage that we are talking about here, because which happens because of the way you manage stress. Yeah. So when I thought I would give it that context, so to help us understand. Now, I go back to the issue I mentioned, why men have a hard time. It's rooted in the divine nature because we do, as I mentioned, leadership, because of their leadership position in life. So they feel a little bit high, and to be vulnerable, to admit that you're stressed, and then to deal with it becomes a problem. So that's why I said I'll take it a level lower. And so they get into this, they're like, no, I should be up. No, I should be. And is it bad? We'll talk about it. But just to mention that to men who are listening and viewing, that it's okay to be stressed. It's okay not to be okay. So for you to have stress and anxiety, because life is experienced, and life experiences are not always positive. So when we experience this, we are supposed to be flashing out those stress hormones. When we talk about stress management, so that we don't plunge into depression, we actually are flashing out the the hormones, the stress hormones. Because every time you experience something, that trigger, and then you analyze it and you're able to manage it and understand, that's important.
Yeah.
But if you trap, so what Ben was talking about, when we trap and we get dismissive, it doesn't go away.
Yeah.
What does it do? It puts pressure on the body,
Yeah.
and the body produces more stress hormones. So that's, yeah.
It's very interesting you should mention that. One of the things that I have been very proactively preaching about the last maybe 6 months or a year or so is that whole distinction that I think a lot of people keep missing about who we are. I think the three of us are aligned on this. Some people don't understand it yet fully, but the truth of the matter is that Dr. Evers is a spirit being with a soul that resides in a body.
Exactly.
And these three things have to live in harmony.
Exactly.
If any one of them is off, there's always going to be a problem.
Yep.
And I think a lot of the depression comes from, mostly from the level of the soul, because it's about your emotions and feeling like I'm not in control.
Exactly.
I don't know what to do.
Yep.
And then because you're not sleeping enough, it has stressed you, so you have insomnia, which then releases the chemicals
Yep.
that you're talking about,
Yep.
that then becomes a problem.
Yep.
And so if you then haven't aligned the third part of, oh, I'm not in control, let me go and pray, oh Lord, help me. Just to be being able to find that peace. In the Bible, it is written very clearly. Some of the most stressed people in the history of mankind are found in the Bible. Jesus got stressed
Yep.
to the point where he tells God, hey, I don't know what to do.
Yes.
If it is possible, take this cup away from me.
That's vulnerability.
Right?
You see?
Take
Yes.
this cup away from me,
Yes.
yet not my will, but yours be
But
done.
your will.
David is my favorite character in the Bible. I think, okay, Jesus is our savior, and yes, but for me, David is the guy because I don't think there's anyone who was more vulnerable than David in the
No.
Bible. And he was able to say, you know what, I am depressed. Why are you downcast, oh my soul? Said, my soul is downcast within me. He keeps on saying things like, my heart has grown faint. I can't even eat food.
You see that?
But then he always comes back to the same place where he says, but God, my hope is in you.
Yeah.
In the New Testament, I know we might have many people who are not very religious, but I give this perspective because you must understand this and how important it is.
Very.
The admonition from the Apostle Paul to, I think it's the Philippians that he tells, don't be anxious about anything. Says, look, I know there are things that will stress you. Jesus said, in this world, you will have trouble. It's guaranteed.
Yeah.
What does he tell them to do? He says, don't be anxious about anything, but in everything, prayer, petition, thanksgiving, which is, attitude. I'm sure we can talk about that. You come and tell God what your problems are,
Yeah.
and then he will give you
You
peace.
see?
The biggest issue around depression, and especially for men, is just that absence of peace. I think a lot of men fail to understand that it is possible for you to have peace in the midst of absolute chaos. Where I am able, and our host is aware of this through interactions with your guest, where you've gone through such difficult circumstances that under normal circumstances you should not be able to sleep.
Yeah.
And yet, once you come to that level where you understand, do I have control over this situation? No, I don't. Is there anything I can do about it? No. Will worrying now fix this? No. Okay. Let us sleep. We shall pick this up tomorrow morning.
That's right.
And then you put your head down and you actually
And you sleep.
Is it easy? No.
No.
But I think once you begin to understand that and train yourself to be able to find that level
Yep.
of peace in the midst of all circumstances, I think it becomes easy. So men especially need to understand the fact that you don't have to be in control. Like Dr. Evers has said, it's
Yeah.
okay not to be okay. And once you admit that to yourself, first of all, then it makes it easier for you to be able to say, you know what? I'm dealing with a situation, I don't know what to do about it. And
Yeah.
then it makes it much easier for you to open up to people, to open up to your spouse, to friends, and sometimes to the world. Just come and say, especially now in a social media world, you become vulnerable and people just laugh at you instead of offering support. So how
That's right.
Yeah.
You see how everything goes back to inability to be vulnerable?
Yeah.
Yes. You see, actually, he reminds me of the second point I wanted to make. So the first one I said, it is rooted in the divine nature where someone feels they are up and shouldn't go down. And it also, we do workplace support. And it's very interesting. People who utilize therapy in these workplaces are predominantly lower cadre staff. We don't get the bends of this world. They go like, me MD.
How?
Then I start talking about how my marriage is crumbling. And it does crumble.
It does.
So that, and why we are talking about it here is that people will know that it's normal. It's normal. Because that person in that position will fall sick and go to hospital. So why do you go to a doctor? You know, to treat symptoms of depression. So that's number one. But the second point is, I think men have also been raised, I think maybe it's connected with my first point. They have, society has raised them to be horribly, and please mark my words, like horribly achievement focused.
Yeah.
And they haven't been helped to fall, to learn how to fall, right? So anything that points to I'm about to not achieve, then that's death. Actually, it worries me so much. I recently, I visited somewhere, and a child was saying, we were going to pray, which is important. And then this child said, I want to get only A's in my exams. And, you know, I was found in a place where I said, okay, should I pray about that? Or should I actually talk about it? And I picked the courage to say, you know, even when you don't pick A's, you're good enough. Right? Now, men haven't received that grace. Unfortunately, they haven't benefited from that kind of gracious nurturing where they are able to embrace the fact that they can achieve less. They can fail, what we call failure management. You know, if supposing you don't get this, what happens? And so if someone is just focused on, I have to achieve as a man, I have to be a man. You see, that's where all those statements are rooted. Be a man. What does it mean? Like, be big. But where have we helped men to know that I can aim at being big, but I don't have to be big all the time. I don't have to achieve all the time. So that is important. Yes, Ben.
So how do you, what is achievement? Because I think one of the biggest problems that we have as men is the sort of pressure that we put ourselves under because of what society has defined as success. So success is the big house in Kololo?
Is
that what is going to make you happy? How many people do we know that live in Kololo that are miserable?
Yeah.
Again, I like to do social research, if you want to call it that, and one of the ones that I've been doing, and I am yet to find anybody, and I've been asking around anyone who cares to listen, for anybody to find me anyone who they know that has had a stroke that is considered poor. You find me a poor man who has been recorded Mbu, he suffered a stroke.
Oh, that's very interesting.
I dare you to find me one.
I've never thought about
Why?
it. Yeah.
Where does this, because that poor man has usually made peace with his circumstances to the level that his ambition is not to become a multimillionaire. He's in the village, he's got his banana plantation, he's able to feed his children. Once in a while, he'll be able to pay tuition for his kids. Where he's not able to, he'll call Dr. Ivas and say, Hati Abana, I don't know what to do, so is there anything you can do for me? What you talked about vulnerability, that poor person usually has absolutely no problem admitting that I have a circumstances that I have no control over, and I am more than glad to ask for help. The man here who is putting himself under pressure, the manager and the CEO, if Dr. Evans is driving a Mercedes GLE, even me, I must get one. Is it going to make his life better? Absolutely not. It's actually going to cause a lot more stress, because buying brakes for that car is going to cost his entire salary. But because he has now reached that level, he can't go backwards. And so he will do everything in his power, sleepless nights, abandon the wife and kids, don't give them enough time, work extra, find an extra job, chase a side hustle, do whatever it takes, because I must maintain this standard where I have gotten a salary loan to buy this Mercedes. Now I must maintain it.
That's right.
And then that is just causing all of these things now, going back to what you talked about, and it's adding on to all of this stress to the point where that man is literally depressed the entire time, and he doesn't even know it. Then you have another guy who's like, you know what? I don't need to impress anybody. What's wrong with a man driving a Vitz? And yet you drive a Vitz as a man and say, you're driving a woman's car?
That's right. Oh, I was accused one time of driving a man's car.
Oh, wow.
So disgusting.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Oh, because you have a Land Cruiser. So
I was driving a big car, and someone, you see those distortions?
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
So actually, Ben, what you're talking about, I was just trying to thresh it and say, yes. Do you see that, number one, you make a very, very important point about wrong definition of success.
Yeah.
And which, of course, now that desire for achievement, men tend to have that pressure to achieve, so to be successful. But yes, a natural desire to achieve, which is okay, but which is unregulated. So that's the point I was making. But what you're talking about is this pressure to be successful and a skewed perspective to success. Success is mostly for men material oriented. And which puts people on pressure, because you can never have what everyone has. But also you subject yourself to the world to define for you what success means. And that's why, by the way, on this show, we try to make sure that people understand that actually success is more of relationships than material things. So if your relationships are confused, fractured, painful, and all that, that success is absolutely lacking. That's why people are miserable amidst plenty. Amidst plenty, pain. Big houses, pain.
I think the challenge, Dr. Evers, is that many of those who don't yet have the plenty have not yet learned. So for them, they are still striving to get to the plenty at all costs. The ones who have the plenty have done us a huge disservice by not being able to tell the other people and saying, you know what, where you're trying to get to, it's not what you think it is.
It's not the thing. And by the way, Ben, let me tell you, you reminded me of a conversation we were having on I love WhatsApp. Sometimes I hate it, but I love it because it brings information closer to us. But there was a conversation around the poor, how the poor are happy, and I don't want to get into that conversation. I don't think so. Like everyone has their own problems. The whole conversation we're having here is contentment. Peace. And I always remind people that life is so basic, very, very basic. The only challenge we have is that we realize that when at a point when we are aging. You know, I was running a show recently on retirement, beyond money, retirement planning. And I was reminding people that life begins basic. Children need basic things. Basic, they need to see mommy and daddy smile, or an adult in their lives happy, and then they're like, ooh, I can trust the world. You see, it's good. They're not thinking about bills, they're not thinking about, it's so basic. When we are aging, we also age basic. Basic, by the way. And I was reminding viewers that in people who are aging, because retirement is synonymous with aging sometimes. Of course, there is involuntary, but I've seen I have a lot of interest in the aging. Yeah. Let me tell you, they need basic things. Yeah. Basic things. Yeah. Now, they need a smile. They need to have had good relationships with their significant others, their children, their spouses, if they are still glad to have them.
Grandchildren at
grandchildren,
that point.
Grandchildren, neighbors who are still can say hello. A social network where you still can have people to smile. Yeah. So it moves from billions on your account to just smile, a hello, and just basic things. Yeah. Now, if we got that wisdom, we wouldn't be doing all the dramatic things in between.
That's true. Unfortunately, Dr. Evers, I don't even know if people would listen, because I know there are some people at the top who have come out to say, look, this thing that you're striving for, this actor who passed away recently, Matthew Perry, who killed him, did he kill himself?
Died of overdose, I think. Yeah, took his life. Yeah.
You see? I told you that in between, we miss the most important question. Just a little phrase. Yeah. Then what? Then what?
One of my favorite questions of all time.
Yeah. Then what?
So you've made $1 billion.
Then what?
And then what?
Yes. I was talking to someone and said, in the next 2 years, I want to be a billionaire. And I asked him that question. I said, then what?
Then what?
So we never ask. By the way, that's where contentment comes from. Yeah. And I will use this channel to say, once again, we don't need so much. We don't. When you check, you didn't need so much. Yeah. And in my work as a therapist, I've met so many people who are stuck with things. Yeah. Material things. Yeah. Now, we have to know that these material things are supposed to service our lives. Yeah. That's why we need to ask the question, I get this, then what? When I'm driving a car, do I see it as a means of transport or as a symbol of fame and status? Right. Yeah. Now, there's nothing wrong.
And how much joy or happiness is that actually going to bring to you?
To you.
As a person.
What is the motive behind all this? Yeah. Because, I mean, there's nothing wrong with driving that good car. Yeah. It's okay. Absolutely, these things are there to be used.
Thank you for saying that, because I do love good cars, and
yes,
I'd like to drive a Bentley before I die. So.
Please do get it, get it. But it should not come at the cost of your happiness and of your relationships. Racheal, can I remind viewers once again that our happiness, and this is science, please check it out. Check out a study that was done by Harvard University. It's about happiness. It's a happiness survey. And this has been done for the last 80 years. Wow. 80, not 8. 80. So it's what is it called? It's not a cross-sectional, it is a longitudinal survey. Yeah. So it's a longitudinal survey that is carried out amongst one cohort of people. So they keep checking what happens at different stages in life. Turns out our happiness, 90% of it is from relationships. Yeah. So that's what we call relational health. So only 10% from material things. But how much focus do we put on material things? Yeah. 90%.
But even the 10%, if you actually take a deep dive, I am almost certain that you will find that 10% that is on material things is because the material has probably facilitated relationships at some level. So it's still, usually we will go back to being the same thing.
We then focus on the material things as opposed to...
Yes. Yeah. How do you nurture your relationships? How much investment do you put in relationships? Because material things, interestingly, we can't achieve because we have no contentment. You see? So if every other day you're saying, I must drive this before I die, you see? And so when you wake up, you see these bits of you, they're like...
Because I mean, a lot of you are achievement focused, like Doctor has said. And I think I'm curious to know, because they don't talk about depression, they don't talk about their stresses, how then does depression present in men? What are the things to look out for to say, oh, this person needs help? Maybe go talk to Dr. Evers or find a friend to talk to. I think it would be nice to know what the triggers are.
Take this on. We have expectations on them that they are supposed to be strong 24 hours a day.
Yeah.
And so when you mention that where do they even go, they don't have so much opportunity to be vulnerable. And I'm hoping that by sharing this, someone listens and knows that it's okay not to be okay, number one, but also the situations they go through. They don't have many points where they are able to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
We will talk about their spouses and all, but it's as if everyone around them is saying, be a man. And that message has been, by the way, taken to a whole other level,
Yeah.
that they can't be vulnerable to their peers. They'll say, be a man. They can't be vulnerable to in the church.
Yes.
They say, man up. They
Have faith.
Have faith. You are a man. You are the head. So they hear all these messages that put them further down. How do they wither away?
Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the symptoms for any person in the life of a man, whether it's a brother or a husband, is to see them wither away. They get withdrawn.
Yeah.
They get withdrawn. What do? So they get into their cave and they are trying to reflect, especially on how they failed to be a man.
Which makes it even worse, because then it becomes a self-repeating cycle. Because the more you think about it,
very, very dangerous. Yes.
There's a thing that Dr. Evans about the mind,
Yeah.
and how it affects the man. Because the more you dwell on something, the more you're feeding it, the more
Yes.
it grows. What we talked about earlier, your soul.
Yes.
Again, I keep saying I love David very much, because I love how David encouraged himself.
In the Lord.
Yeah. So David encouraged himself in the Lord, but also David just plain encouraged himself. He would just keep telling himself, my soul.
He also pulled out his soul, by
Yeah,
the
yeah,
way.
he told his soul, my soul.
He would say, be still, my soul.
Yes.
You know, so it's, we talk about the message you give to how you challenge your thoughts.
Yourself. You say, you know
Yes.
what? I
Yeah,
am going to be
still.
I am going to be okay.
I'll be okay.
This too shall pass. You know the things that we
Exactly.
keep saying of nothing is permanent. I always tell, when a man comes to me and says, oh, I am depressed, I can't pay rent or school fees, I tell them, okay, so what's the worst that can happen in this situation?
Worst
case
scenario.
Let's paint worst case scenario.
Thinking, yeah.
You're going to be evicted from your house.
Yeah.
Okay. Your kids are not going to go to school for another year or so. Okay. Is the world going to end?
No.
So,
But is that true also? It
but-
can be a distortion.
I'm just saying yes, but
Yeah.
I'm just saying. So let's now go to the worst case scenario and come to the point where we are going to now come to the level where I'm going to have to think about where I can take my family, whether it is to find a brother and tell him, give me a room in your garage or something like that. That whole thing of the vulnerability and being able to
And generating
accept
different
circumstances.
options.
Yes.
Yes.
Once you've made peace with that and says, this is the worst that can happen, and I'm okay to live with that, then it takes away that burden of now, what are people going to say? What will people think?
pressure,
The pressure and the
yes.
embarrassment. And then almost every single time, what it then does is it allows you the opportunity to now start thinking solutions.
That's right.
Because before that point, you have no capacity whatsoever to think solutions. Your mind is filled with porridge, which I like to say sometimes turns into posho. And you have no capacity to actually think about, what can I do about this? But once you've made that peace, then you're thinking, okay, now how do we begin to build from that? So that peace becomes very, very important.
Very important. And you see, Ben, that only happens because we were talking about meditation. But what you meditate on matters.
That's true.
You see? So it's not just meditation. And so it's not for a man to step off. And I've had a lot of talk about, oh, you know, men get into their caves, and that's okay. But what you do in that cave is important.
Yeah.
Are you recycling the problem, or are you generating solutions?
Yeah.
That's the most important thing. So when a man steps, withdraws. And withdrawal is it's one of the key symptoms that we see in depression, whether women or men. But for men, because men naturally, they don't talk so much about life. They talk soccer, they talk politics, they can really make noise, especially when they feel secure in that environment. But when it comes to matters of life and relationships, they don't usually talk at emotional level. Yeah, they are happy to discuss logistical things and, sports and things that are out, areas where they can conquer. Because when you're supporting Man U, but I'm a Man U fan. Yes, I am, but conversation for another time.
That's actually one of the causes of depression at the moment for many men. So.
Okay, so I'm aware of that. But the thing is, they tend to get out and discuss what we call emotional hideouts. So they get into these emotional hideouts and talk, and which is important for releasing stress. But then they have to come back to life matters, real life things, relationships. They have to go back and talk to their wife. They have to go back and deal with the children. They have to go back and deal with challenges at work. Things that affect you as an individual, not a Man U's player. So when it comes to that, they have a very, very big challenge. But now, when you want to notice that this person is depressed, you're going to see them even lose interest in the things that made them happy. The politics. They no longer have what we call psychic energy to invest in certain things. So that's very, very, very important. Withdrawal.
The withdrawal also sometimes presents in different ways. So you suddenly see that this person doesn't want to hang around people a lot. They will be very reluctant to attend functions and events. For many men, that usually will take them into a bar. So you usually will see a spike in the intake of alcohol, for example. For many men, they turn that embarrassment and shame a lot into anger. So if you see a very strong spike in aggression, you might try to write the man off or think, he's become abusive and all of that. And he might, but if you look a bit deeper, many times you'll find actually that it's his way now of venting, and he doesn't know where to go. He's not able to scream. He can only, it's sort of his way of trying to reach out, but he doesn't know how to do that. So the only thing he can do is, we've all heard the stories where your father will come in and he's complaining who has left the light on, like and you don't understand where that's coming from. You're wasting sugar.
Round up everyone.
And beat you up.
And you think, what's going on? It's for him, it's now just processing all of this emotion at the same time.
That's so true.
And I think that, and I know we're supposed to talk about where especially for the married men, where that comes in. I don't think women understand the sort of power, but also danger they pose to a man in this situation. Because literally, if the man is teetering on the edge, his spouse has usually the power to either just push him or pull him back. And it's in the smallest things, in being able to say, you know what, it's going to be okay. I am here for you. I will hold your hand. I will support you. I will. For many women, it's a thing of, what kind of man are you? You can't even pay your children's school fees.
And we're going to get there. So apart from withdrawal,
yes. So withdrawal, and he has talked about some of the other things like taking to negative coping mechanisms, drinking, alcohol, drugs, betting, sex, because they are trying to essentially, because when you're depressed, you've lost pleasure.
Yeah.
There's no pleasure in it. So anything that, so we start craving pleasure.
Yeah.
So anything that can give you pleasure, people go after it. But I have to warn viewers that please be careful that how you cope doesn't produce what we call secondary problems or secondary depression. So that's yeah, so negative coping. But also, so it's escapism, that negative coping, withdrawal, aggression. Yeah,
Yeah.
aggressive behavior, outbursts, anger outbursts.
Yeah.
And we don't understand it because, as I mentioned earlier, once we trap emotions, by the emotions are to be expressed,
Yeah.
whether positive or negative. That's why I encourage people, please, if you still have a positive, express it.
Yeah.
Express love. I know people who just, they're about to be killed by their love. Me, I don't show them. Me, I don't know. It's supposed to be expressed.
Yeah.
Yeah, so even happiness, they are, again, we have been, depending on how we have been brought up, there are people who can't express feelings. They have them, but they can't express them. So even so I've mentioned, the positive need to be expressed. Happiness, share. But negative ones, negative emotions are powerful,
Yeah.
very powerful, and they linger on more than the positives.
Yeah.
So if they don't share, they are going to bottle up. So this is potential for an eruption.
Yeah.
And so when a man is depressed, they are not as gifted as women to be vulnerable. And I've always said, you've heard me say that sometimes men don't understand women. They think when women are sharing, they are gossiping. No, it's not gossip. You see, women find it much easier to open up and be vulnerable. So when I sit with Racheal, I'll say, do you know, I feel like this, I feel like that, I feel like, and so our connection is more it's at emotional level. Men's connection is more at functional level.
Yeah.
That's why you talk soccer, politics, functionality, and logistics. Even the kind of conversations they have in their vital relationships. Sometimes it can be logistical. The car, sugar, water, sijui, what else. And
Russia and Ukraine.
yeah. And so that's why I've always encouraged men, please, don't get this woman, lady, you marry them, you told them how you loved them. When they get home, you turn logistical. And you're talking about a car, school fees. Like, if you told anyone that, would you marry them? No. So it's very important for men to know that they need to express. Emotions have to be let out in a healthy way. So if they don't do this, then they are bound to get into eruptions.
If mental illness is an illness and it's an illness and depression is an illness, your reaction should be the same. It's just that now the way it usually will manifest sometimes will, because we don't understand what it is like, we then even, I think especially for the women, make it much worse because the symptoms are not what you would see as an illness. You're seeing what you think is abnormal behavior. Yes, you're seeing abnormal behavior in your husband. You're seeing your husband misbehaving. You're seeing your husband mistreating you. You're seeing your husband being insensitive. You're seeing your husband being angry. You're not seeing your husband being sick. You're not seeing your husband being depressed. And at the very worst case scenario, what that does is it pushes the man further away, in the extreme case to suicide, which we see happen quite a bit.
That's right.
On the other hand, when the woman now then says, oh, this is a challenge that my husband has, he's sick, and then you begin to deal with that. Dr. Eva said something about how she doesn't understand how you can go to the doctor to get medication for something that could have been prevented. Because a lot of this mental illness or depression, in my opinion, maybe 95% of it doesn't have to get to the point where you get medication.
Yep.
I've had clinical depression before. I've spoken about this in public back in 2012. It was driven by money, money problems. Until I woke up one day and realized, you know what? I can't kill myself because of money issues. Again, what I talked about earlier. Worst case scenario, I'll go to prison. Okay. Then the world will say, Ben went to prison. Okay. That danger looms over me up to now. On a daily basis, I'm always thinking, at any point, someone is going to come and say, get that guy. But it's not something I can allow to bother me anymore, because otherwise, then how do you live? And I think for me, the point I'm trying to raise here is that having a spouse, and I'm not talking about Racheal, I'm talking about my wife, you know, right? Having a spouse who then says, I don't care about what mistakes you have made that have gotten you to this point. I don't care how bad this is. I am going to be here for you. We are going to go through this together. You think about the contrast from a man's perspective.
Yeah.
On one side, you have a woman saying, what kind of man are you?
Are you?
Gurabe. Yeah. Right? And then on the other hand, you have one who is saying, I am here. I will hold your hand. I will. It's.
That's true. I'll come in, Ben, and that's what it's supposed to be. But I'll give you scenarios where a man might not achieve that. So, Racheal, you asked. I wanted to add one. Not actually that, but I wanted to also tell viewers that one of the ways in which one of the symptoms of depression in men is suicidal ideation, which a woman might not see, but you'll hear it, or any person near this person needs to hear it, because it comes out, it comes, or what is life about, you know, some of those statements, and they are not to be taken lightly. So I just thought about it as Ben was sharing. But Ben, let me come back to you on that issue. You know, I am a mental health practitioner, and I encourage people to always be alert, especially when it comes to depression. It's much easier to detect stress and anxiety, but very hard to detect depression. Because when someone is anxious, you're going to see it. But when someone is depressed, they just shut down. And it's very easy for someone to shut down, especially when your partner is a quiet one and they don't say much. So you can easily miss it. However, depression, by the way, mental health issues, mental health challenges are much easier to prevent than physical illness, because they are rooted in our choices. Yeah? Yep. I may not choose cancer, although of course some of the cancer is also connected to stress and all that. So much of the depression comes from our behavior. So mental health issues come from our choices and our behaviors. And so depending on what the trigger is, Ben, we are talking about family relationships. And I'll tell you that our behaviors, or some of the depression, will be self-inflicted. So when, for instance, a man makes certain choices that are going to lead him into lots of management, because life is about management, and our health, our wellness is dependent on how much we have to manage. That's why children rarely get depressed unless parents drive them there. And so when we grow, we have more issues to manage. That's, as a life coach, I always tell people, please make choices that are not going to give you so much to manage. You know, we've had this conversation when we were talking about unfaithfulness in marriage. And so you find that, and I tell people, for instance, a man will get into extramarital relationships. So let me talk about this, because that's what I deal with every day. So if a man gets into extramarital relationships, those relationships, you know what happens. I always tell people that not every extra is an addition, you know. It's not. So you get into an extramarital rate. That's a whole management platform. So you have this to manage it. Now you put pressure on yourself, right? And you find that that brings a dynamic in your relationship. That can be a source of depression because now you have to sustain it. Every behavior that has to be sustained with negative energy, be careful. Because now you have to lie to maintain that. You have to hide. You have to. So you see how we plunge ourselves into mental health issues? So now in such a situation, Racheal, where a man has gone into that, and that's a major depression trigger, right? Because it has created so much stress. Now you're there. Now there's conflict at home. You have conflict with the other person. You have conflict. You're at work. You're confused. Then you plunge into depression. This is hard for your partner to support you.
Yes, absolutely.
You see? So it's always much easier where someone, I mean, the inevitable, like you've gotten into financial issues, but also sometimes you find that the choices someone has made, maybe the partner came in and said, don't do that. And then this man says, I'm a man in this home. So again, do you see how it's rooted in how the choices are made and how the behavior, how the relationship is. So the support this man is going to get, much of it, and by the way, I'm not pushing you or pulling down. Much of it is dependent on how you are relating, right? And the support you're going to get from your partner. That doesn't mean that, as Ben said, we don't have partners who are insensitive, who are unreasonable, who actually push these men. And I'm a great advocate for men and mental health in men. And I really, really want to appeal to ladies. Sometimes the statements we make, we carry these stereotypes, as Ben was saying. You're the man. And so men are put on so much pressure. For instance, some women who don't give their men an opportunity to fail. Yes. Your husband is a superstar. They are not. He's going to make wrong decisions as well. He's human. He's going to make wrong judgment as he's making an investment plan. And I've spoken to ladies a lot, and I've said, yes, maybe this is an opportunity for him to learn that that doesn't work.
Pay school fees.
You see? And so how about if he cannot, he is not able to support the family financially? Why do you use that as the only point of identity for this man and say, now what kind of man are you who cannot do that? So now some men have taken to borrowing and borrowing, even when the wife can afford to support. And once again, if I may use this opportunity to appeal to ladies, sometimes God has put you in a season where he's supporting the family through you. But then they are saying, oh, what kind? It's his responsibility. He's the man in this home. And we have had this conversation about finances and how it's such a big stress trigger for men.
Oh, yeah.
But I know that I've mixed so many, but I wanted to say, number one, the relationship you have with your partner will determine how they get to support you. And what caused you stress will also determine how you get support
and how they respond.
Yes.
I think one of the best things that my wife ever said to me was, because at some point where you're doing this self-reflection and you're thinking, I've made so many bad choices that have caused so much stress and led to a very difficult season. And she came up to me and held my hand and said, look, I know mistakes have been made.
Yes.
But the one thing I know I'm convinced of is that everything you did because you are trying to make a better life for us.
You see that?
That changed my life.
I'm sure.
It took away such a huge burden
Of you, that's true.
In this particular case, this was true. You have made mistakes. Like you said, you have committed completely and ended up in a ditch. But you are doing that because you are
meant
trying
well.
to. Yeah, you meant well. And I think for me having that perspective
is powerful. And that's exactly what I'm saying. So you can't just judge this man as he's not supposed to make a mistake, he's not, no. He's human. And so I think that message needs to go out to partners of these men to know that he can also make a mistake. He can also, so the whole power of grace.
Yes.
How gracious are we when our partner has made a mistake? But also, how gracious are we? How supportive are we when this man loses a job? Because you see, I've seen, again, we see this every day. But when a man has gotten gotten into that place of adversity, how do we support them? Because I know, I've ever heard of someone who told the husband he had just lost a job the previous day and said, now what?
Oh, wow.
Yeah, now what? You have to pick your broken pieces and go, because you're the head of this family. Wow. That pressure, really.
Wow.
But that goes back to what you said about the relationship. Clearly, that means that there's
yeah, it's so inhuman.
Speaking on behalf of the men, I think if you say that, there is a 99% chance that man is going to start thinking, who are you? There's a 99% chance you're going to end up being a co-wife. Because the man is thinking, I don't think there's a point where a man needs more support than at that point.
That's right.
That's the most vulnerable a man can be. So
exactly.
For the one person who's supposed to be supporting him, telling him that...
That's the challenge. Actually, just one thing, Racheal. I was reading an article yesterday about, the title was 5 Beads That We Miss in Marriage. And one of them was a point where your partner needs all your support, and you miss that. Yeah. The other one was when your partner touches you when you're making coffee and you continue making coffee, you coffee lovers.
Yeah.
And they touch you,
please emphasize
that
point. They are
bidding for your attention.
Please emphasize that point.
Yes, but let me tell you, the time your partner, especially your husband, remember that it doesn't come natural for them to be vulnerable. And so when you're only a wise woman, a wise wife, will look and say, this man is not doing well. And they'll you may not even say so much, just to touch them and say, you'll be well, be well.
I'm here for you.
I'm there for you. Yeah. Just statements that are so reassuring. Yeah. That's what we need. What is life about? That will help them to come up. In any case, even if I talked about self-infliction, even if they did that, I always tell people, when someone is drowning and they are saying, help me, you don't stand there and say, how did you get there? And most of the time we do that. But we are supposed to come and say, and rescue them, and then you can ask that question when they are out of it. Yeah. So it's easier said than done, but it has to be done. Yeah. And so it's very, very important for women, especially, not to miss that point of that bidding point, where your husband is bidding for the slightest emotional support. Yeah. And do they need much? They need, are you okay? Just to realize when they are withering, are you okay? That's a big statement that communicates care. Yeah. And you'll be fine. Yeah. Life is about seasons. Yeah. I know you meant well, or whatever it is. That's if they haven't really inflicted the emotional ecosystem. Yeah. But whatever the case, we just have to be good human beings.
I mean, we could be here the whole day. I was joking earlier that between Dr. Evers and Ben, we can talk about this for 3 hours, but we need to stop here. We need to stop here. Thank you. For now, yes, for now. Thank you both for sharing your insights. Ben, for giving us a man's perspective. Me calling you Ben, yes, I know. But for the sake of the reality check family who are not in our home, I'm going to call you Ben. And Dr. Evers for just giving us that mental health expert perspective, I think has been a wholesome conversation. So let us know in the comment section what has been your experience with depression, if you're a man and you are okay to share, or maybe a man in your life, for the women who you have watched. Thank you for watching. We appreciate your feedback. So let us know what you thought about this episode. We'll be back next week with another insightful conversation. Don't forget to subscribe and like and comment, and of course hit the notification bell so you know when we have a new episode. Until next week, bye bye.